Who We Are.
Sound check. Check the sound system. Talk with the musicians about their intentions. How do they want to sound? Listen to every loudspeaker and input source. Adapt to the room acoustics. Amplification should be barely noticeable. Compare the source on stage with the monitors and PA. Instruments should sound as natural as possible. What to adjust, what to leave the way it is. Is it possible to capture the essence? Only this moment in time matters. This is now, this is live.
I have written and reworked this piece whilst riding trains which connect places just as music connects people. I am travelling with my computer in order to write this, but also with manuscript paper, working through ideas for forthcoming projects. For me personally, one of the things which writing for improvisers can often involve is reflecting about how musicians within a group might relate to one another. When improvising in an ensemble of a certain size, the ideas keep coming. Trios, quartets and quintets, for example, contain not only a certain number of minds generating, interpreting and manipulating material, but additionally very many ways for those within the ensemble to organise themselves into smaller units, whether operating in sequence or in parallel. There is a constant flow of information and possibility, and performing in ensembles of this size can be a freewheeling joy. With larger ensembles, the parameters may change depending on how the ensemble is organised. Interesting and mutually supportive engagement in these contexts can involve different dynamics, adhering more closely to preset materials such as a written score, or consciously leaving more silence, to give just 2 examples, in order that the amount of information flying around doesn't become noise, which obscures more than it fascinates. The duo is a context with a special intimacy. The web of relationships which materializes in trios and larger is no longer present, with the information instead flowing in a very concentrated way, classically in the form of a conversation, although there are of course other options. In the light of all of this, playing solo looks like a different creature. Whilst it's true that things such as the acoustic of the room or the idiosyncrasies of the instrument can provide input of sorts, ostensibly the performer generates all the ideas in this setting. This is a responsibility, but for some also a liberation. I don't think, for example, that Art Tatum's genius was ever more apparent than in the solo setting, and in a very different way, consider too the unique window into a composer's mind provided by the Mingus Plays Piano album, or by any number of Anthony Braxton's solo recordings. Indeed, via his concept of language music, Braxton's solo language can be seen in some respects as generating all his other music systems, whatever their scale. Irrespective of whether we're dealing with solo music or ensemble music, and it may be unfashionable to admit, but I now find myself increasingly less focused simply on process and more also on outcome. That is, on what the music actually sounds like. With the seismic upheavals in our music of the 1960s, I'm thinking, for example, of the innovations of the AACM in Chicago, or of the first wave of European non-idiomatic improvisers. We can contest that label, but it serves a basic purpose here. Process was examined with an exhilarating immediacy. The music still sounds urgent and radical at this distance of more than half a century. Younger generations, however, have come up familiar with these at-the-time hard-won innovations. We have become adept, since the 1960s, at dealing with much of what the process of improvising music more or less freely can throw at us. With a modicum of certain basic oral and technical skills, any event in improvisation can be incorporated and worked with. I think this is one reason why the attempted maverick intervention in improvisation is so often nowadays a cliché, and why the genuinely maverick intervention is so rare. I think this also helps us to recognise how remarkable musicians of the likes of Evan Parker, Anthony Braxton, and a handful of others still are, to be at the true avant-garde of this music. A music which, for all its unbelievable richness, probably claims an avant-garde more than it should, since as improvisers, we are as vulnerable to routine as anyone. What is remarkable is that these musicians have innovated on more than one front, not only in terms of processes, which have by now become relatively commonplace, but also in terms of the very musical language spoken. But despite there being a sense in which many of the processes of improvised music are old news, there is a sense in which I am increasingly interested in the process of music making. This is the sense in which music making can be seen as a communal, communicative enterprise. Musical vibrations forge a necessary physical link between people sharing music in a space, even a virtual space where we are talking about recorded music. It creates, at least in some minimal measure, an empathy relationship between experiences. Essentially, we are missing a large part of the totality of the act of doing music when we are focused solely on being musicians, insofar as this means focusing simply on what is happening with the relationships on stage. Yet the communality concept is much broader than this audience-performer relationship. Concert organisers, sound and lighting technicians, piano tuners, agents and countless others are all invested in the process of making music happen, as, in a different yet crucial sense, are the teachers. We can expand in another direction and include broadcasters, writers, photographers, and more. Thus, when we play solo, there may be no immediate external musical inputs on stage, but the remainder of the ensemble is still there. All music is ensemble music. This view does not somehow entail some notion of artistic compromise. Although music is a communicative give and take, the give is the act of preparation and playing, and emphatically not to do with making some gesture perceived as accessible. The most compelling performances, indeed, are those where the most personal vision is offered, not some patronising attempt to second-guess taste. It is only the most uncompromisingly personal and sincere performances which fully acknowledge the agency of the audience. Thus we can experience the shared magic of the accessible yet utterly personal, say Curtis Mayfield, but perhaps less intuitively we can also experience the shared magic of the intensely lonely performer. Consider Michelangelo at his most monastic. To put one aspect of this another way, just as political theories which stress solidarity, mutual support and interdependence in no way preclude personal expression or radical individualism, indeed, perhaps they even foster these, so it is with music. Think of any given Ellington band, one of the greatest ensembles of them all, and yet one which could at the same time not only accommodate, but give freedom to the wildest flights of fancy of a Rex Stewart and a Cootie Williams, of a Joe Nanton and a Lawrence Brown, of a Johnny Hodges and a Harry Carney, even within the same 3-minute masterpiece. It is a very closely analogous individual-collective dynamic with a Cruyff, a Socrates, or a Garincha. In an increasingly atomized world, music continues to provide a means to communicate across linguistic divides, but also gives opportunities for moments of togetherness in a context where we are increasingly alienated by technologies. Technologies such as the mobile phone, which, ironically enough, are at least ostensibly there in the first place to enable people to communicate. Cage talked of the capacity to open the mind to divine influences. Let's perhaps substitute in the word spiritual to avoid too much connotation with deity, but we nonetheless know what Cage means. We have all had transcendent moments as listeners, and some of us as musicians. Indeed, you may imagine some of the photographs in this book to capture such moments. But we don't need to romanticize these moments. Music can be magical and transporting, but the magic is in the mundanity. The miracle is that these moments are rooted and shared in something as everyday as sonic vibrations, whether organised or not. All music is ensemble music. The photograph is the outcome, but the photographer is part of the process. The photographer, whose work is contained within this book, is part of the communal act of music, as are we, the audience now to the images, just as we are to the sounds.
Na tumba tumberão, eu sou marinheiro da barca furada. Eu sou malungueiro de partida chegada. Que zumba zumbi, que zumba zumbi, que zumba zumbi. Na tumba tumberão, eu sou marinheiro da barca furada. Eu sou malungueiro de partida chegada. Que zumba zumbi, que zumba zumbi, que zumba zumbi, que zumba zumbi.
There are a group of people I miss every day, whose images provoke a physical pain inside when I remember that they're gone. David Bowie, Louise Bourgeois, Francis Bacon, Doris Lessing, John Cage, Anne Truitt, Alexander McQueen, Virginia Woolf. I have treasured memories with each of these people. David Bowie's first entrance on stage during the Glass Spider Tour in 1987. Descending from the body of an enormous spider that encompasses the entire stage, sitting on a golden chair, dressed head to toe in red and with glorious, huge hair as he speaks on an old-fashioned telephone, orating the story of the spiders of Mars. I watched it on VHS. I was 3. What's terrible is to pretend that second rate is first rate. To pretend that you don't need love when you do, or you like your work when you know quite well you're capable of better. Finishing Doris Lessing's The Golden Notebook and painfully missing Anna Wolf, a character Lessing has brought to life so completely and tangibly that closing the book felt like shutting the door on a close friend. Lee Alexander McQueen's 1999 show, number 13. Shalom Harlow stands on a rotating pedestal in a pure white dress. 2 arm-like robots move around sinisterly, looming over her and inspecting her while the music builds and she looks afraid. Verdi's Requiem thunders on while the 2 robots spray paint the dress with green, black and yellow paint. McQueen said he stood in the wings and watched and shed tears as he watched his ideas become real. I felt such immense pride. The first time I laid eyes on a Francis Bacon painting, Het 6, 1949, at Leeds Art Gallery as a student. I'd got in to see a Walter Sickert painting, but wandered into another room. Like a light bulb moment, I recall what I was wearing, how the room smelled, the color of the walls, and every detail of that painting. The feeling of my heart actually growing, swelling as the painting has such a direct and immediate effect. That open mouth, the power of a flat image to provoke a clear and obvious sound to the viewer's mind. So started my love affair with Francis Bacon. Watching an interview with John Cage and Merce Cunningham and hearing the soft, kind, thoughtful voice of Cage as he described their process of collaborating. At that moment, I realized that what Cage was a great mind, that whatever medium he found himself in, he would have shown the world his greatness, because it was his thought process, his way of connecting information and thinking about situations that made him unique and extraordinary, and realizing too how beautiful his soul was. I won't go on because my delight and indulgence at recalling these moments will most certainly outweigh the enjoyment of others reading them. But what I mean to say is that what excites me and fills me with joy is the thought that for a while at least we shared the same earth. Through art, we develop bonds with those we'll never meet. These strangers, miles and often decades away, make us feel. Feel as strongly as those we know and love most can make us feel. These bonds can alter our thoughts, influence the direction of our lives. We wear our relationships with these people and their art as key indicators of who we are. That is the power of art.
One. Whenever I get the opportunity to travel to Japan, I try to visit the Sanyu Sangen-do temple in Kyoto first. The gold-covered surfaces of the old wooden statues with countless eyes and hands are waiting for me. Facing the 1,000 life-sized images of Senju Kanon touches my body and soul. Perceiving myself as part of the universal spirit, I am no longer a visitor. They say, music is the healing force of the universe. A love supreme. Celebrating, we are one.
Thanks a lot for coming out tonight. Who we are.